They don't pay $30 an hour for nothing. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the gravel lot of Coyote Fuel and Go. My headlights swept across the weathered sign, the neon coyote flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay lit or surrender to the darkness. The gas station sat alone on a long, desolate stretch of Highway 160, a solitary outpost in the vast emptiness of the Navajo Nation. Red rock mesas loomed in the distance, their silhouettes barely visible against the starlit sky, like ancient sleeping gods. I killed the engine of my rusting Honda and sat for a moment, just watching the station. The wind pushed a layer of desert dust across my windshield. The night felt too still. The sign out front had lost most of its lettering, Cote Fuel Go, like even the letters had started abandoning the place. I'd found the job on a classified board taped to a laundromat wall back in Flagstaff. Just a phone number and the words, "Night clerk needed. Cash daily. Start tonight." I needed money. Badly. Student loans, rent, and a blown transmission had cornered me. So, here I was, parking in the middle of nowhere, telling myself the pay was worth it. Besides, what could really happen? It was just a gas station. I grabbed my backpack and stepped out, the air thick with sagebrush and heat that hadn't quite cooled from the day. The front door creaked open like it hadn't been used in weeks. Inside, a single overhead bulb buzzed like an insect trapped in glass. The aisles were narrow, dusty, and filled with outdated snacks and motor oil. An old radio behind the counter played Navajo chants mixed with static, like it wasn't sure what station it wanted to be on. That's when I met Red House. He was the night manager, I guessed. Mid-50s, skin weathered like leather, long gray braid down his back. He handed me a worn set of keys and a list of rules scribbled on a diner napkin. Don't go out after midnight, don't answer knocks after 1. Don't open the basement door. If the coyote sign turns red, stay behind the counter. He said it without emotion, like he was reading off a grocery list. I tried to joke. Are these rules or a horror movie plot? He didn't laugh, just looked at me and said, "You'll see." Then he left, his taillights vanishing into the desert. I stood alone in the store, unsure if this was some elaborate prank, but something in his voice had settled in my spine like ice water. I looked down at the napkin again, the words smudged and oily. Don't answer knocks after 1. That one stuck with me the most. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the only one that felt oddly specific. I put my bag behind the counter, clocked in with the old-time punch machine, and started the shift. The hours crept by. A coyote howled in the distance. I scanned candy bars and cigarettes for the 2 customers I had before midnight, both truckers, neither friendly. When the clock hit 12:40, I realized something chilling. I hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The desert outside had turned pitch black, and I was completely alone. The store clock clicked past 1 a.m. with a metallic clunk that echoed louder than it should have. I sat behind the counter, stiff in the cold silence, watching the second hand stutter forward like it was struggling to keep time in this place. I remembered what Red House had said, "Don't answer knocks after 1. I wasn't sure why that part stuck with me more than the rest. Maybe it was how casually he said it, like someone warning you not to leave the fridge door open too long. Normal words wrapped around something much darker. That kind of thing stays with you. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in my throat. There was no one here to laugh with. Then it happened. At exactly 1:07 a.m., there was a knock on the glass door. Not a tap, a knock. Heavy, deliberate. 3 slow beats. Boom, boom, boom. I flinched so hard I almost dropped the coffee cup in my hand. My first instinct was to look at the monitors. The security cams buzzed with static, flickering like they were underwater. No clear image, just blurred outlines shifting in grainy darkness. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and peeked out from behind the counter. The front of the store was empty. No cars, no lights. Nothing but the faint shimmer of the neon coyote sign, now glowing red instead of white, casting a sickly hue across the desert ground. Another knock, louder. This time I could feel it in my chest. Boom, boom. Boom. I stepped closer to the door, stupidly, drawn like a moth to the flame. My hands were shaking. The desert outside had never looked darker. I couldn't see more than a few feet past the glass, and beyond that it was like the world had simply stopped existing. Then I saw it. Or him. A figure standing just at the edge of the light, hunched low, almost animal-like. His arms were too long, his legs bent the wrong way. His head, it wasn't shaped right. I blinked and he was gone. I backed up so fast I slammed into the chip rack behind me, knocking a dozen bags to the floor. I didn't care. I ran back behind the counter, locked the register drawer out of reflex and ducked down, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was expectant, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stared at the radio, still whispering static. The voices were louder now, clearer. I could almost make out words. Something like, "Come out and don't hide." I wanted to shut it off, but I couldn't move. My body felt glued to the floor like gravity had changed its rules for me. Then the lights went out, not just flickered, died. Everything fell into pure black. For a second I thought I had gone blind. I scrambled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The weak beam pushed back the dark just enough to show me how empty the store suddenly felt. The shelves looked taller, narrower, like they were closing in. The floor seemed farther away. I swept the light across the counter, and the beam landed on the basement door. It was open. Just a crack, maybe an inch or two. But I hadn't opened it, I knew I hadn't opened it. And the scratch marks on the door frame, they weren't there before. They were long, uneven, as if something with claws had dragged itself out. I aimed the light at the gap, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw an eye staring back. Not a human eye. Something darker, glossier, like oil on water. I threw the flashlight across the room. Not on purpose, my hand just rejected it. It hit the floor and rolled, casting dizzying light circles on the ceiling. In that chaotic movement I saw things. Shapes, crawling across the floor, hanging from the ceiling like wet rags. Whispering in languages I didn't know but somehow understood. They weren't real, couldn't be. But I knew better now. This place wasn't just a gas station, it was a gate. And I'd been hired to guard it. The power surged back on without warning, buzzing to life like nothing had happened. The lights snapped on, the hum of the fridges resumed, and the security monitors cleared. Everything looked normal. The basement door was closed again. The crow smear on the glass was gone. I stood up slowly, checked my watch. 1:31 a.m. Had all of that happened in 24 minutes? It felt like hours. My mouth was dry, my knees weak, but I was still here, still breathing. I wiped sweat from my forehead and turned toward the counter, and that's when I saw it. A feather. A single black feather lying on the register, slick with something red. I hadn't seen it there before. I didn't want to touch it, but I didn't want to ignore it either. So I picked it up. It was warm. By the time the feather cooled in my hand, I realized how much the air had changed. It was thicker, heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on the building, testing it for cracks. I put the feather in my jacket pocket, not knowing why. Part of me hoped it was just a prank. Maybe Red House left it as some weird initiation test. But another part of me, the part that felt like a child again, told me that whatever had been knocking wasn't gone. Just waiting. Watching. I spent the next hour pacing the store, triple-checking every lock, flipping the light switch a dozen times just to reassure myself the power was back for good. Nothing else happened. No more knocks, no more whispers. Just silence and the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock behind the counter. At around 3:15 a.m., I stepped outside to get some air. The desert was moonless, the sky thick with stars that didn't blink. The neon coyote was still red, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stared at it for a long time, and for a split second I could swear it moved, turned its glowing head to look at me. I blinked hard, then looked away. I lit a cigarette I didn't want and leaned against the ice freezer. That's when I heard the humming. A low, vibrating sound, like something huge was passing overhead. But there were no planes, no lights, nothing. Just the deep thrum of pressure rolling through my body. My vision blurred. I dropped the cigarette and stumbled back inside, locking the door behind me. The radio had changed. No more static. No more chants. Now it played a voice, female, soft and slow, repeating something over and over in Navajo. I couldn't understand it, but it sounded like a warning. I picked up my phone to translate it, but the screen was black. Not dead, blacked out, like it had been erased from the inside. I tried the landline, but all I got was a high-pitched whistle that made my teeth hurt. I slammed it down and backed away from the counter. That's when I saw the footprints, barefoot, clawed, wet, leading from the basement door to aisle 3. I followed them because I had to, because something inside me whispered, if you don't look, it'll come back stronger. The prints ended at the refrigerator aisle, in front of the old beer cooler no one touched. The glass was fogged, but something moved behind it. I wiped the condensation away and found myself staring into my own eyes. Not a reflection, another me, inside the cooler, mirroring every move. Except it was smiling. Wide. Unnaturally wide, teeth too long, eyes too bright. My hand moved instinctively toward the door, but it moved first, pressing its palm against the glass. A black crack formed where our hands aligned. The lights flickered. My vision split. 2 versions of the store folding over each other. One normal, one rotting. The shelves were moldy, the ceiling pulsing like skin, the aisles filled with figures wrapped in cloth and bone. Then the knock returned. This time from inside the basement. I spun around, heart clenching. The door was shaking just barely, but enough to make the "Do Not Open" sticker flap like a loose bandage. I thought about Red House again. His face, his voice. Something in me wanted to scream for him to come back. I'd do anything to see his taillights again. But I was alone, and the rules were clear. Don't open the basement door. I turned back to the beer cooler. My doppelganger was gone. Just rows of dusty bottles now. The footprints had vanished too. But a message had been scratched into the linoleum where they once were. You are the door. I collapsed behind the counter, clutching my knees, breathing hard. Was I hallucinating? Was I sleep-deprived? Or had I stumbled into something older than sanity? That message echoed in my brain. You are the door. What did it mean? Why me? Why this station? And then I remembered something Red House said right before he left. I'd brushed it off at the time, but now it rang out like a gunshot. This place doesn't need a clerk. It needs a witness. The realization sat in my gut like a stone. I hadn't been hired to run a gas station. I'd been brought here to watch something. Or keep something from watching us, maybe both. Maybe I was the barrier, the seal, the thin thread keeping some ancient horror from crawling into our world. And the job was never about money. It was about containment. I stared at the flickering lights, the humming radio, the glowing red coyote. Every part of this place was a symbol, a sigil, a ward. The gum racks, the mop bucket, even the goddamn freezer full of expired taquitos. They weren't just junk, they were anchors. Tools in a ritual I hadn't been told how to perform. The knock came again, and this time something answered. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up on the floor behind the counter, curled around the feather like it was some kind of protective charm. It was light outside. Morning, maybe? But the clock on the wall still said 3:33. I stood up, knees shaking, and looked out the window. The sky was gray. Not morning gray. Not stormy gray. Just wrong. As if someone had pulled a sheet over the world. No sun, no clouds, just flat, endless gray stretching across the desert like a dead channel on an old TV. I stepped outside, expecting cold air, birds, maybe a passing car. But there was nothing. No sound. No wind. The silence was alive, crawling into my ears, burrowing deep. I wandered past the pumps, toward the edge of the lot where the asphalt ended and desert began. The world felt paused, like I had slipped between frames of reality. I turned around slowly and stared at the station, and it blinked. Not a metaphor, it blinked. The building seemed to shift subtly, its corners bending, the glass distorting. The Coyote Fuel and Go sign flickered, and for 1 second it said something else. Something in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. We feed it so it sleeps. Then it returned to normal. I took a step back and nearly tripped over a bundle on the ground, wrapped in animal hide, tied with hair. I bent down to look closer and realized it was moving. Breathing. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't. But curiosity is a cruel master. I undid the knots with trembling fingers. Inside was a doll, human-shaped, but wrong. Its head was a coyote skull. Its arms were made of dried fingers, stitched together with sinew. And its heart, yes, it had one, was a shriveled lump of meat, still pulsing faintly. I dropped it in horror, and the ground seemed to gulp, swallowing the thing whole. I stumbled backward, hyperventilating, when I saw the lights inside the store flicker again. The red glow was back, deeper, darker, like blood behind frosted glass. When I re-entered, the air inside had changed again. Heavier, like a storm waiting to break. The humming had returned louder this time, vibrating through the floor and up my spine. The shelves were bare now, every single item gone. Except for one thing, an old, rotting ledger sitting open on the counter. The pages were thick with dust, but my name was on the latest entry. Underneath it, one sentence written in that same unknowable language, "The door breathes." And below that, "Red House, released." That was the moment I understood what happened to him. He hadn't quit. He had been set free. Whatever this place was, it needed a caretaker, a conduit, a warden, and the only way out was replacement. I had been brought in not to train, not to learn, but to inherit. My hands trembled as I flipped through the book. Names upon names. Dozens. Hundreds. Some crossed out, some marked with symbols that bled through the page. I stopped at one from 1978. The name was Ezekiel Black, and next to it, scrawled in red, were the words, "Broke the seal, fed the gate, buried alive." I closed the ledger and backed away. That's when the lights went out again, but not all of them. One aisle glowed faintly. Aisle 7, the one with the cleaning supplies. I hadn't even noticed it before. It hadn't been there before. But now it was, longer than any aisle should be. And at the far end stood something tall, wrapped in black feathers, holding a gas mask in one hand and a bone in the other. It didn't move, didn't breathe. But I knew it was waiting. For me. To accept. To kneel. To become what Red House had once been. My instincts screamed to run. But where? The outside wasn't real. The phone was dead. Time didn't move. I was trapped in a ritual older than language, older than bone. I stared at the figure at the end of the aisle. It raised its arm slowly and pointed toward the freezer, the one where I'd seen the other version of myself. I turned. The glass was fogged again, but this time something pressed against it. A shape, twisting, changing, becoming me, becoming what I would be if I gave in. A door, a lock, a wall between worlds. That was the job. That was the truth. The station wasn't here to sell gas. It was a sacrifice, a machine, and I was its operator. I turned back to the aisle. The figure was gone, but the mask and bone remained on the floor. I picked them up. The gas mask was ancient, cracked, and smelled of ash. The bone pulsed with warmth. I held them both and felt something crawl into my mind. Not evil, not good, just old, beyond morality, beyond reason, and it whispered a question into the pit of my soul. Will you burn or bind? I didn't understand it. Not yet. But I knew my answer didn't matter. I had already chosen the moment I walked into the lot, the moment I touched the feather, the moment I stayed. This place didn't take orders. It gave them. And it had chosen me. I don't remember putting the gas mask on, but I felt it seal around my face like it had always belonged there. The bone in my hand pulsed harder now, syncing with the strange rhythm in the air. Not quite music, not quite breathing. It was like the station itself had a heartbeat and I was being drawn into its pulse. The store lights faded into a kind of twilight glow, colors melting into one another like oil on water. Time lost all shape. I wandered without purpose, without destination, past aisles that stretched impossibly far, looping back on themselves like a Mobius strip. I passed versions of myself, flickering, translucent, one stocking shelves, another weeping in the corner, another smiling with a face that wasn't mine. They didn't acknowledge me. They were echoes, failures, or warnings. I found myself outside again. Or at least, I think it was outside. The desert was gone, replaced with something endless, a flat plain of white dust stretching under a black sky filled with red stars. The gas station sat behind me, its walls breathing, pulsing with the beat of something vast and ancient. The neon coyote above the sign burned brighter than the sun, casting long shadows across the strange landscape. And in front of me stood a figure, not the feathered one from before. No, this was Red House, or what remained of him. His skin was cracked and dry like desert clay, his eyes glowing faintly beneath a mask identical to mine. He didn't speak with words. He didn't have to. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, and in that moment I saw everything. Not with my eyes, with something deeper. I saw a time before the station was built, before roads cut through this land, before humans whispered names to the wind. I saw a cave hidden beneath the earth, a thing trapped inside it, writhing, dreaming, feeding on memory and fear. I saw the first warden carve glyphs into stone, sacrificing a piece of his soul to keep the thing asleep. I saw a line of caretakers stretching across centuries, each chosen, each broken, each buried in time. The gas station was never a place. It was a prison, a temple, a ritual, a feeding trough for the forgotten god beneath. Red House nodded and I understood. He couldn't leave, not until someone else was chosen. He had watched me, guided me, even haunted me, but he never meant harm. He was preparing me, grooming me, and now that I had taken the mask and bone, the pact was sealed. The door had a new lock. The prisoner had a new guard. Red House began to fade, his body crumbling into feathers that caught the stale wind and vanished into the red sky. His burden was mine now. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned and walked back toward the station, my footsteps silent on the dust. Inside, the store had changed. Cleaner now, brighter, almost welcoming. The clock on the wall read 8:10 a.m., and the door chimed as it opened. A young man stepped inside, skinny, confused, holding a duffel bag and a fresh uniform. My replacement? No, my assistant. Every generation learns a little earlier. I smiled and nodded to him. He didn't speak, just stared around, blinking in the artificial light, catching glimpses of something he couldn't quite name. He wouldn't see the truth right away, but the station would show him. Eventually. Sometimes at night I hear the thing beneath the floor shift. It groans in its slumber and the lights flicker, and the freezer door breathes like a lung. I keep the ledger updated. I sweep the floors. I restock the shelves that refill themselves with things that were never sold. I drink the coffee. I count the crows that gather on the roof every dusk, and I wait. For what? I don't know. Maybe for someone to break the cycle. Maybe for someone foolish enough to open the door and let it all out. Until then, I serve. I watch. I remember. I see the travelers come and go, their faces hazy, their memories already fraying as they leave the lot. Some feel it more than others. Some drive faster after filling their tank. Some ask questions I pretend not to hear. How old is this place? Do you get cell service here? Was that sign always blinking like that? I answer politely. I smile. I ring them up. And when they leave, I mark them in the book if the station tells me to. Some are chosen, most are not. But the door must always stay locked. The hunger must always be fed. And when I sleep, if I sleep, I dream of the desert that no longer exists. I dream of a coyote with eyes like stars and a voice like rustling leaves. It tells me riddles I'll never solve. It asks me questions in tongues older than my bones. And always, before it fades, it whispers the same thing. You're not guarding it, it's guarding you.